It suddenly struck me, in terms of custom cars and everything else that I've been involved with, because I mean, if you think about the race car, that really wasn't just me. But I guess it all started actually a long time ago, further than this baby behind me, further than the race car, with a Corvette Stingray in the UK. Yes, I bought a 1969 convertible Stingray. What a beautiful car. I have to say it's still one of my favourite cars, really, in terms of shapes and just beautiful lines and curves, and muscly and sporty all at the same time. Well, not sporty to drive. We'll get onto that later. So most of the friends I pre-warned about my intention thought I was nuts. Don't know if that included my ex-wife. No, I don't think it did. Don't think I told her. And what you have to appreciate if you're one of my USA viewers is that these beasts are extremely rare in the UK. And of course C3s, that whole generation, are increasingly rare now everywhere. But in the UK, the C3 generation, for example, probably numbers in the hundreds. So this was literally at the turn of the century, turn of the millennium even, and yeah, I don't know, did I find them on eBay or did I find them in Exchange and Mart at the time? I don't know, but whichever it was, I found two within a couple of 100 miles, and my mate Will agreed to join in with my lunacy and go see these cars and give his valued opinion on quite what was involved in getting them shipshape. First one we went to look at was one careful lady owner, well, at least the last owner, and not so careful, bit of a state. So we moved on to the next one quickly. Trouble is, when you're desperate to buy something, you make mistakes, and especially when there's a limited availability. I now know what I should have done is join the Classic Corvette Club UK prior to even thinking about buying a Corvette, and meeting some of these people and talking to them, because I've been in a lot of car clubs actually during my life, and I have to say the Corvette Club is by far the best. I made a lot of very good friends who are still dear friends, and many of whom have come and visited me here in the US, so thank you to all of those who have. It's really nice to see your ugly mugs over here, and for you guys to experience the Southwest, and particularly Sedona. So where was I? Yeah, me and Will. Yeah. So obviously at the back of his mind was the fact that he'd have to sort out any crap that I bought. And so we went on to see the second one. And to me it looked more horrible, honestly. There wasn't much to choose between the two. Both of them were binners, really. But Will reckoned it was more solid, generally. Because he was groveling around on the floor like he does and looking at things that I have no idea about, and he reckoned that it was solid. It hadn't had any nasty accidents. There was no trace of bodge job repairs, certainly trace of a bodge job paint job, but yeah, he decided that it was the better of the two, and if I was in a real hurry after 40 years to get a Corvette, then this was probably the better of the two. It's called Hobson's Choice in the UK. So I gave the geezer a deposit and I headed home and worked out that I could go pick it up a couple of weeks later. If I remember rightly, I think I paid 9 grand for it, which probably seems like good value nowadays. But at the time, not so much. So yes, I already had like a reason to go back to that area, because my good friend Mr. Sansom, knack to his very old friends, who I've known since I was about 8 years old. He'd invited me to go to the Goodwood, no, it wasn't a Festival of Speed, it was the other one, the hysterical one. Yes. And so we headed down, we had a lovely day at Goodwood, saw lots of old interesting motors and racing and people all dressed up like they were out of the 1940s. It was a great day. Anyway, I digress. He dropped me off. I handed over the cash. We went to the nearest petrol station where I forgot how the complicated system of starting it, because the guy had put in a starter button and the key didn't actually need to be in the ignition as far as I remember. Anyway, got it restarted and he headed home to Cambridge and I headed home to Milton Keynes. He's sure he got home before I did? Yes, despite the fact he was in an Aston Martin DB7, which is proved later not to be the most reliable of vehicles, I have to say. I guess he got home all right. When did I break down first? I think there were several occasions where it seemed to be expiring. The first I remember was on the exit, the M25 to the M1. I had to pull across 2 lanes of filtering onto the hard shoulder, basically freewheeling, and luckily everyone recognised that this old piece of shit was gonna die and let me across. I don't remember exactly what the situation was at the time, but I managed to get it restarted and off I trundled again. Again, this was a long time ago and I'm an old fart, so I don't remember the exact things that happened that night, but bearing in mind we set off at about, I don't know, 7, 8 o'clock. Knack was probably safely at home having a nice dinner. And anyway, the final time it broke down was just a few miles from home on the M1. I think it was between junction 13 and 14, and that's where I lived, junction 14. And yeah, finally had to admit defeat and call the AA, which is the British equivalent of the AAA, because AA in the US is something totally different. And by that point, believe me, I could have done with a drink. So yeah, I think I eventually got home at 1 AM the next day. And everyone was very impressed with my purchase. Not. I had some grand designs for the vehicle. I wanted it to look like the Stingray, not the first Stingray. Well, I mean, it's the same paint job, but not the first Stingray, because that was a C2 kind of derivative, well, actually concept. And yeah, I wanted it to look like this. Just love that Mako sharp paint job. So I set about stripping out everything that was rubbish, which was a lot. Interesting exercise, found some American coinage still in the car, under the seats and under the carpets, and half-smoked spliff, and I won't go into the rest, but yeah, it was an interesting exercise, gutting it. I was originally from Florida and actually had the Florida thing, badge, whatever, on the windshield. So yeah, it probably had a very interesting life, certainly by what I found. Having ripped it all out, I sent various bits off to various people who were going to help me out with seats. We'll come to that later. And by that time it was winter. I decided to piss off to New York for a few days, and I dumped it on my mate Steph to begin the paint job. And I say begin because obviously it's a difficult paint job. By the time I got back from New York, it pretty much snowed everywhere. I think, if I remember rightly, it even got delayed by a day flying back because it dumped a shed load in Manhattan, and it dumped a shed load in London, where Steph was based. And Will and I drove up one night, picked the car up in the dark. Paint job looked good, and it was actually. It just wasn't quite right. And if you bear in mind the struggle that Corvette themselves had to appease the, I forget his name now, but anyway, the guy that wanted the Mako paint job. It's not surprising, it's actually very tricky to get it looking even half decent. So Steph had done a wonderful job, honestly, and Will and I set about getting everything else shipshape, which took a long time. Thanks to a lot of help from Scott at Corvette Kingdom, we managed to rebuild the steering box, all kinds of stuff actually. I can't remember honestly what we had to do, and fitting all kinds of new lights and chrome and getting stuff rechromed, and the seats were done by another friend of mine and his father, who ran a company at the time doing limited editions for people like Honda. So the Jordan edition of the Honda Civic CRX, I forget what it was, basically done by them. So what happens with those manufacturers when they come up with a special edition is that they ship the cars to someone like my mate James, and that company guts the car, recovers everything in the new trim, including embroidery and everything else. So James and Co did my seats, and here they are, and perfectly to my requirement. As far as what Will got up to, I'm going to have to dig out his invoice actually, if I've still got it. I probably haven't, to see exactly what we had to do to this car, just to get it vaguely running. Did I say invoice in the singular? I think I meant invoices in the plural. And actually, James has raced with us in the Lemons, in the Porschette. He first joined us here at Wilcox, and this photograph's here. And again in slightly, well not slightly, very wet and rainy Sonoma. And jolly good driver he is too. If you haven't checked out the Porschette video and the construction and development thereof, I'll put it as one of the links at the end of this one. Yeah, throwing a small block Chevy into a Porsche 944, a lot of fun. So back to the Stingray, and yeah, lots of things done. Yeah, seats replaced, dash trim all sorted out and replaced. Bits and pieces needed replacing, i.e., you know, various knobs, and the fibre optics didn't work, and the vacuum windshield, windscreen wiper cover didn't work. Actually, nor did the lights, because they pop up on vacuum too. So got all that sorted out, the steering box, the fuel lines, pretty much everything, and she was ready to roll in one shape or another. Paint job wasn't still quite how I wanted it, and Steph took a second stab at it with some white, and just perfect. Exactly what I wanted. Absolutely perfect. Brilliant. Various ongoing mods, including a vast selection of wheel trims, from spinners to the eventual, what were they called? The DeLuxe wheel trim that was actually offered on the 69. Ironically, I bought them from a guy in Arizona, and when they arrived, they were a little dusty, as you can imagine, because everything is here, it's in the desert. And yeah, I cleaned them in the dishwasher at the time, which kind of royally screwed it, I have to be honest. Don't try that. Grit and dishwasher's not a good combination. And the old girl ran pretty good. She did have this weird thing where she would overheat immediately, almost immediately, spew out a ton of water, and then once she cooled down, she'd run perfectly. So the cooling system was a bit weird. There was some extra stuff in there, and we never really did fathom what was going on, but yeah. Eventually I sold her, attracted by a younger model. And yeah, I was sorry to see her go. Great car, great looking car. Still one of my favourite all-time just designs in terms of aesthetics. Just fabulously curvy and pointy all at the same time. And of course, fabulously American. And now look what I ended up with. A Bel Air. Well, there we go. Essentially, that was my first custom restoration, mod, whatever you want to call it. And that was quite a few years ago now. And as always, with a little help from friends, or maybe a lot of help from friends in that particular instance. So thanks for watching, and again, apologies for the lack of video of the actual vehicle itself, but it was the turn of the century and video wasn't so easy in those days. If you've got any questions, leave them in the comments below, be glad to answer. Do subscribe, do watch some of the other videos, especially that Porsche one. And yeah, invite others to watch my lunacy. Oh yeah, and like me on Facebook and Twitter and all that stuff, Instagram.